Good afternoon, everyone. Members in the chamber, visiting members, members of the public, anybody that may be listening to this remotely. The meeting may be recorded and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swellborough Council KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website on a mobile and table device, it is not always possible to identify you and you may not be recorded as in a remote attendance. Welcome members, officers, and any members of the public, as I've already said. Right. Team leader, Mid Kent Legal, Robin Harris is in attendance. Contentious lawyer, Mid Kent Legal, Helen Ward is in attendance, and licensing team leader, Chris Hills is in attendance. And Democratic Services, Joe Millard and Philippa Davis. Make members aware of the emergency evacuation procedure for purposes and any visitors that interest of fire exits are to the right, which is there. There are no planned fire evacuations planned for today. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. The apologies have been received from Councillors Beat, Councillor Gould, Councillor Horton and Councillor Thomas. Thank you.
Anybody got a non-pecuniary interest or a pecuniary interest? I will now go on to item 4, which is the issue of concern, potential relaxation of street trading requirements for the Faversham Pop Festival. I will ask the licensing team leaders to introduce them.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. The purpose of this meeting is to request members to consider waiving several of the licensing requirements contained within Swell's current street trading policy in respect of a one-off 2-day street trading application submitted by the event organisers of Faversham Hop Festival, due to take place on the 3rd and 4th of September. Details of what licensing requirements are requested to be waived are shown as recommendations for members to consider at the beginning of the report. By way of background, street trading is governed by the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982. Amongst its provisions, it allows a local authority to decide whether they wish to designate streets within their boundaries as consent streets, which means that if a person wishes to sell any article, they will need to have a consent from the council unless it falls under specific exemptions. Trading without a consent is a criminal offence with a fine of up to £1,000 on conviction. Swell Council formally designated all its streets and its boundaries on the 23rd of July 2010. There's no specified legal process as how an individual obtains a consent, and it's left to each local authority to decide what process must be followed. To assist applicants and the public alike, Swell has set out the application process in a street trading policy, a version of which has been in place since 2013. Members will recall that a draft revised street trading policy was presented to this committee on the 20th of February 2020 and was approved for consultation. After consultation took place, this committee then approved the final draft policy on the 21st of January 2021, and it was formally adopted by Council on the 31st of March 2021. There were a number of changes to the previous policy, which included a change to the application process for one-off consents relating to events. Previously, an event organiser could apply for a one-off consent to cover a number of stalls. This has been removed, and whilst an event organiser can still coordinate applications, each trader must have their own consent. New application requirements, which are an application is to be submitted 8 weeks before an event and includes a 28-day consultation, is detailed in paragraph 5.3.3 of the policy. There is also a requirement for all applicants for annual or 6-month consents to provide a basic DBS check, and for applicants for one-off consents to have a DBS check if it is considered necessary. The consultees for the draft policy are detailed at paragraph 2.5 of the report. Members will note that whilst the holders of existing annual or 6-month consents were contacted, holders of previous one-off consents were not, and this included the event organisers for Faversham Hop Festival. On the 6th of July, the event manager for the Hop Festival emailed me to ask about the new licensing requirements, as I'd previously spoken to his colleague about the changes. Unfortunately, because I was on annual leave, I could not respond to confirm the process until the 19th of July. This email exchange is shown as Appendix 2, page 33 of the agenda. On the 27th of July, an application for a one-off street trading consent was received. No fee was received, and it was confirmed that DBS checks for the directors of the event company would follow, together with a list of stallholders. The application is shown as Appendix 3, page 37 of the agenda. To date, no DBS checks or a list of stallholders has been received. On the 8th of August, the Director of Community Heritage Events Limited contacted the Chief Executive, Larissa Reid, to ask her to intervene regarding these issues in complying with the street trading requirements. The email and attached letter is shown as Appendix 4 and 5 of the agenda on page 41 of the report. Whilst there is insufficient time to consult on this application, the event management plan is always put to the Safety Advisory Group, which includes many of the consultees for street trading consents. There have been no adverse comments from this multi-agency group, and the licensing team are not aware of any issues involving street trading at previous Hop Festival events, which has run for many years. With regards to the requirement for DBS checks, the policy states that for one-off consents, they are required where necessary and may not be relevant for all stallholders and could depend on the nature of the goods sold and access to vulnerable people. As this is a large event with many people around, this element of risk is far less than for holders of annual or 6-month consents. It is acknowledged that certain parts of the policy and the application form could provide greater clarity than at present for event organisers, and it's therefore my intention to revisit these elements, amend as necessary, and provide a report to a future meeting of this committee for your consideration. Members are being asked to consider if a fee should be charged, if any at all. This is detailed at paragraphs 2.16, 2.17 and 3.1 of the report. Lastly, members are asked to inform the event organisers that if members agree to waiving of licensing requirements, that it is only a special exemption for this year only, and that moving forward, the event organisers will be expected to comply with whatever conditions are contained within the Swale Street Trading Policy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I now invite Mr. Jones from the Community Heritage Events to speak. You have 3 minutes. Can you put your mic on, please? Thank you.
Well, first, thank you for agreeing at such short notice to sort out the desperate situation we've been placed in. My name's Colin Jones and I'm a Director of Community Heritage Events, which organises the Hop Festival under a 3-year contract with this council. As you've heard, the Hop Fest was due to take place on September the 3rd and 4th. Changes have been introduced to street trading policy without any consultation with us, as has been acknowledged. We are the promoters of the biggest street festival in Swale, nor were we informed of the changes once they were introduced. By the time we became aware of the changes, it was too late to amend our application process for stallholders. We were in no position to take on their additional costs, as we were already struggling to meet much higher than expected costs ourselves. There was little time for traders anyway to complete DBS checks. Yet it is not viable or desirable to run the festival without stalls, and we would not proceed without a street trading consent in place. Clearly, there are lessons to be learned from how we have got to where we are, touched on in the officer's paper, but that is for another occasion. Our letter to Larissa Reid was a last resort as we faced having to cancel the Hop Festival. The constructive response from officers and yourselves in arranging this emergency meeting gave us the confidence to believe there was a way to resolve this. With so little time until the festival, we have therefore continued preparations, including making the necessary contractual and other commitments. As you can imagine, what is anyway a stressful time has been made much more worse by the continued uncertainty. To put it mildly, there's a lot at stake here. It's been 3 long years since the last Hop Festival and some challenging times. It took a successful public appeal to raise the funds to proceed this year, testament to its enduring popularity. My plea to you is to waive the new licensing requirements for this year only and grant us, the organisers, a 2-day street trading consent with no requirement for DBS checks from individual traders. We can then get on and deliver a festival which so many enjoy and which brings such significant benefits to the local authority, to the local economy even. As a free community event organised by a not-for-profit organisation, we also consider we qualify for no fee to be charged for that consent. To sum up bluntly, without this consent, the Hop Festival cannot go ahead, which I suggest is in no one's interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I now open this up to members to debate any questions they wish to ask. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 points of information, if I may, or 2 questions. On the paper that was given to us today, it does say, as part of the review and renewal programme, a draft street trading policy was approved for consultation by the committee on the 20th of February 2020. A consultation then took place. My question is simple. Was the events company in that consultation? Because we've just heard they weren't consulted, and the report has made clear that they think they weren't consulted. So were they or were they not? That's question 1. And question 2, the DBS checks, if I read it correctly, prior to 2021, they weren't being carried out anyway, or they were being carried out under the auspices of the events company. So which is it? Were they being carried out or not? Those are the 2.
Councillor Dender, could you come in, Kristen?
Yes, I can easily do that. As far as the consultation is concerned, it was advertised, it was put in the papers and what have you. And it was on our website. But there was no direct consultation with the event organisers. I didn't, for anybody that had a historic one-off event licence with us. In retrospect, you know, I'll hold my hands up. I probably should have thought about the Hop Festival. Then again, I wasn't to know if it would ever come back. But the simple answer to your question is no, I did not consult with them. The second answer regarding the DBS checks is you are quite right, Councillor. Before this street trading policy, no DBS checks were ever required off of any applicant. So this has only come in with this new street trading policy.
Thank you for that. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 1 or 2 things actually. Obviously, this is a huge tourist event, and the borough will gain considerably from that actual effort. All these things are very, very good for the area. So the only questions I've got is with regarding trading standards, and how are the vendors going to be policed, because obviously if you've got certain stalls that are approved, unapproved people could turn up and set up a stall. This does happen, unfortunately. So I notice it's a company limited by guarantee, so that's a brownie point straight away, not for profit. So I think the town can gain an incredible amount from that. The insurance, that's one thing that I'd be very keen on. I used to work for a law firm about 100 years ago, so I did actually look through the thing. And one of the things, obviously, is to comply with the Sale of Goods Act. This is the people who are actually selling things. So they don't have to be registered or anything, but clearly they need to be policed well. And that obviously is the responsibility of the organisers. But I think in the main, I think it would be an excellent event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Would you like to come in on it?
say to your councillor regarding the policing of it. Every hop festival, the police licensing team do actually go out on both days. They're policing everything. So we give them a list of everybody that's got a street trading consent, everybody that's got a temporary events notice, and they have in previous years booted off people that haven't actually got one. So, you know, that they will do that work for us.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points and a couple of questions through you, if I may. I mean, this is a cock-up, isn't it? There's no conspiracy here. It's just a cock-up. I think Swale Council got it wrong a number of ways, and as has been suggested by Mr. Jones, I think we've let the organisers down. My question on that would be, there's a number of questions, but if I rattle through them all, it might be quicker. Was the comms team involved in the consultation, and was there expertise? It was, so that's good news, but no one, that's good. Hopefully that will be reviewed next time we consult on anything, not least the next iteration of this when it comes back to committee. The wording of it, and it's members' fault as much as officers' fault, the wording of this policy is so woolly you could drive a coach and horses through it. And that's as much our fault, members, as it is the officers. You know, where it is considered necessary. It doesn't say by whom, doesn't say where the bar's set. It talks about, well, where's the other one? We've talked about normal requirement is an 8-week consultation. Well, what's a normal requirement? Is that every application or none or some? Define. And so I'll go through if I may. So I will query over that, and I hope that these points are the ones that are addressed when we come to look at this again. It is unfortunate that there was no one else in the building that could have responded to this email. I accept, you know, people go on holidays, and summer holidays are a good period to go away, but it's also a busy period for events. And we have a policy. Members have written it. It's not up for discussion by officers. It's for officers to simply adhere to. It is a bit woolly in places, accept that. But we have legal advisors and we have others. You know, if Chris isn't available, and so I find it unfortunate that the applicants had to wait 2 weeks for a response, and I hope that is going to be addressed as we move forward and people look at officer time and how these things are covered when key people like Chris are away on leave, because they need their leave, of course they do, but their work still needs to go on because this is a moving feast. So I would ask that be considered. And I think that was probably it. When we talk about the DBS checks, again, the policy in 214 talks about may not be relevant and could depend on. I'd like to see that tightened up as well, so that any officer, whoever it may be, or any member could look at the policy and say, this is the reality of this policy, and this is what it means to applicants going forward. I'm in no way do I want to see the Hop Festival cancelled. I've attended many over the years. They're enormously successful events. We owe a debt of gratitude to those that take the time and trouble to organise it, because it is no easy task. You can see that by the sheer numbers of people that attend and the sheer numbers of musicians, of stall holders, of other traders, fun fairs, you name it. The people that are involved is quite astonishing. So I have no desire to see it, but I do think we have to hold our hands up as a council and say, actually, in this, I do think we've let the applicant down. I'm more than happy with the proposals that we move forward as suggested in the recommendations. But I don't want any of those points I've made, and I don't really need an answer to them now. I think they're points that have been made. Can we make sure that they are covered off in whatever report comes back to this committee once it's been reviewed by Chris and the officers? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Whiting. Your concerns will be taken on board. Okay, if I can just refer.
Can I just say, as far as the email is concerned, my out of office always does say when I'm not available to actually email through to either licensing or taxes, depending on what it is. If they'd actually then done that, then the rest of the licensing team, if they couldn't have answered the query, could have passed it up the line to either Steph Curtis or to Charlotte Hudson. So that is one thing that you know, I would say it wasn't just that I go away and nobody knows how to contact anybody other than me, but everything else to do with the policy, I do totally agree with you, councillor. It needs revisiting, it needs to be sharpened up, and that's why I've already committed to the fact that I will bring it back to committee, and hopefully it'll be something that will be a far more workable policy going forward. And I apologise for the fact that it's caused this issue.
Thank you for that. If I may, through you, Chairman, very quickly. Other departments I notice now have generic email addresses, and I think a licensing at swale.gov.uk, which is monitored by Chris and other members in our other members of the team in our absence, may be a sensible way forward with that.
What we have,
I would agree.
so that's why my out of office said, if I'm not there, contact licensing at swale.gov.uk, and that wasn't done. But you know, that's beside the point.
Have Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, clearly there have been some problems here, but I think it's good to see that they're starting to be addressed, and that we're starting to learn from any things that have happened. I think there's several things in the paper which provide good reasons to operate with a bit of flexibility here in terms of the policy we put in place. The paper does make it clear that there wasn't direct consultation with the Hop Festival organisers. It seems as though there's a bit of uncertainty about what the DBS approach is and where it is necessary. And I'm also interested at 2.177, where we're talking about the type of event, because although it's arguably not strictly a charitable event or there are elements of commerciality in the event, it's clearly not a straight typical commercial event. So I do think those things will need to be looked at when you're reviewing what to do next. So I think reading the paper, it seems to me that the proposal at 3.1 is a sound one. I would, in terms of the money, in that you're reviewing how things have worked, you're reviewing the new policy, you're in a certain way working with the old arrangements. I would propose that we stick with the historical charge of £230. That seems like a sensible amount. So at an appropriate time, I'd be happy to propose that.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
If we relaxed the DBS check, as before, it was not a consideration. If unfortunately an incident did occur, as it is in the rules, who would be responsible? Would the council hold any accountability for that?
So the decision before that you're looking at today, the recommendations today, are whether to allow the licensing team to give a consent to the Hop Festival to allow them to have street trading under their license. So they will give a list of traders and a plan of the traders to the licensing team as part of their consent. If there were any offences committed otherwise in accordance with this particular legislation, then, so trading without a license, well, it would be someone who doesn't come within their consent. If there are any other offences, so for example, sale of alcohol, someone's going to require a temporary event notice and a different permission. So if they were not complying with that regime, there's steps that can be taken under the Licensing Act, for example. If there are any other offences, then that would be depending on what had occurred as to whether or not it could be brought under a different piece of legislation. It would depend on the circumstances, but for the purposes of today's recommendations, this is purely to allow the Hop Festival to have one consent for each individual trader.
Thank you. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a second bite. I didn't quite follow that, I must admit, 100%. Councillor Jackson's question was specifically regarding vulnerability of children, and also I note in the report counterfeit goods and so on, which would come under the same kind of legislation, as I understand. So what Councillor Jackson's question and mine is, what happens if a child, yes, falls under that and an incident happens with that child, or counterfeit goods, but particularly it's children I'm interested in. Who is responsible if we don't do the DBS checks?
Are you happy for me to answer? The DBS checks that are in the policy are only required for one-off consents where necessary. Now, we've established that where necessary hasn't been defined for the purposes of this policy, which Chris is looking into and is going to bring a report back. However, the nature of the event and the amount of people that are around, you would suggest that the risk is perhaps lower where there's unlikely to be children alone, for example, with street traders in these circumstances. Any offences that may occur would be a matter for that particular situation. The decision that we're making, that's being made today, is whether to waive licensing requirements. Now, even if all of the other requirements of the policy have been complied with, for example, the time for the consultation, DBS checks would not necessarily be required anyway for these consents. Does that help?
If I may,
Would you like to come back again?
No, actually, I'm sorry, but it doesn't. I have a lot of experience with these kinds of offences over the years. And I did see in the report about there's less chance if it's crowded. Nonsense. There's more chance if it's crowded, not less. So I find that absolutely wrong. Yeah, there is more chance if there are crowds around and a child gets away from its parents, gets lost or whatever, asks for a total stranger or a trader for help. You know, it can very easily happen. So I don't accept that statement at all. But still, the question has not been answered. If we have stated a policy of doing DBS checks from next year, not for now, but if we're going to waive this, which I'm very uncomfortable with in this meeting, if we're going to waive this just for this year, let's take us to next year, and then we're responsible for the DBS checks of traders, and something happens, who is the law going to come back on?
If an offence were to occur, depending on the type of events, it would normally be for the police to investigate based on the evidence that was provided.
I'm sorry, but we would be held responsible if it was up to us to do the DBS checks.
Yes.
With your permission, Chairman. So the whole thing in relation to DBS checks is that it's not as straightforward necessarily as the council will insist on having a DBS check, because it's only appropriate to have a DBS check in the circumstances where to carry out a DBS check would be proper. So it's not immediately the thing that's saying actually a blanket policy of DBS checks in relation to a one-off event would be an appropriate policy to undertake, because actually the whole process of a DBS check is in relation to sensitive personal data, which may or may not be appropriate in the circumstances. So as a general rule, in the situation whereby a person has no opportunity to form a relationship with a child or a vulnerable adult, then a DBS check won't actually necessarily be appropriate. So it may well be the case that a future policy doesn't have that in it. And then I'd go on to say that ultimately, in relation to any criminal prosecution for someone who, took part in some sort of nefarious behaviour with a child, that would obviously fall back on that individual. And you wouldn't be able to transfer a criminal prosecution onto the council for the purposes of not having done a DBS check. As I say, whether or not someone wanted to attempt to sue the council for having failed to undertake a DBS check would again come back to whether or not it was appropriate in the circumstances to have a DBS check, which is obviously going to be a fact-specific circumstance. I think that's probably as close to an answer as anyone can give you.
Thanks for that. I now have Councillor McDonald again.
Yeah, I was just going to concur with the legal team, and Obviously, it's a public place, so if anybody does commit a criminal offence, then the council can't possibly be, unless the council's been negligent. And I don't think the council, frankly, is negligent in this situation. Anybody, you know, even if they've had a security check or something like that, can still commit an offence. So you couldn't possibly be responsible for that. So I think, you know, as long as you've taken a due course and checked, you know, the people are registered, the traders and things like this, it is a fairly unlikely event. But, you know, members of the public, you know, if they commit an offence, then obviously it's a matter for the police. So I can't see the logic in that. If we do a check, that would ensure that this person didn't commit an offence of some kind. So, you know, we've seen it in the public, but it is definitely a matter for the police.
Thanks for that, Councillor Donald. I now move on to Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I totally agree with Councillor Whiting's comments. I was going to raise those myself in respect of the emails, and I'm glad that will be addressed properly. But I don't think that really is the main problem. The fact that we went into consultation and put this back out, and was it 2021? And expect every organisation or event organiser to know it's been agreed by just the means of it's on the council website and we've advertised it in the newspapers is totally insufficient. I mean, the council website is atrocious in my mind. The search engine doesn't come up with the things you ask it for, and I find it, even myself, very difficult to find things on that website. So I very much sympathise with the organisers, and I think as a council, we should be duty bound to find ways of actually getting people or letting people know that there has been a change, and there's a specific drastic change in the way they apply, and maybe it's a case of any organisation that or event organiser has applied in the past. We must have a record of those. Could we send out an email to each one? I know it's a little bit more work to do, but it would save this situation straight away. They would know well in advance, and we wouldn't be put in this position now where we would be stupid not to agree to all these recommendations. It's a wonderful event. I've attended it myself many times, and I still want to continue attending it. And it won't do this council any good if we say we don't recommend these little recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen. Been noted. Any more? You come back one more time, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to follow on from there. I think the answer is that if somebody applies, to let them have a printed copy of the conditions, then there's no dispute.
Okay, that's.
Thank you, councillors. I've noted everything that you've said. You know, as I've already said, I have thrown myself on my sword, and I have said that there were errors. In my defence, this went out to consultation just as we went into lockdown, and like many departments within the council, licensing had an interesting time through the whole of lockdown, and I you know, it got missed, and I can't say anything other than that. I am awfully sorry, and it is a lesson learned. I have slapped my own wrist, and moving forward, yes, every time we have a consultation, I'll make sure that previous consultees are actually included in that. So I can only offer my humble apologies.
We're not here to lay blame. We're not here to. We all make mistakes, and I think in this situation there's too many other circumstances involved to get it right in the first place. So no blame laid.
So that Councillor Stephen. Right. There are 5 recommendations. I will split the recommendations. Do I have a proposer to agree to recommendation 1? Oh, we're going to take them in block 1, 2 and 3 in block. Okay, that's a lot easier. Do I have a proposer? Else? number 4, yeah. Okay, so yes, that is correct, yeah. So I'm looking for a proposal. Councillor Whiting and seconder. Councillor Clark. Thank you. Right. Now go. Yeah. Can I have hands up for all those in favour then, please? That is carried unanimously. So it's been carried unanimously. We move on to recommendation 4 is for members to consider what fees should be charged for the street trading consent. Do I have a proposal for one of these options in the report?
I'd like to propose that we charge a fee of £230, which was the historical one, because we're reviewing our new policy. We're not, so we should keep things as they were.
So you're proposing 230.
Second.
Seconder for that. Councillor Jackson. Okay. Right. Can we have a show of hands in favour then, please? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favour. 9. Councillor McDonald, you're against, and one against. Okay. Members, I'm now looking for a proposal for recommendation 5. 1, 2 and 3, yes. Councillor Whiting and a seconder. Councillor Clark. I will put that to the vote. Hands in favour. Unanimous. Well, I thank all members for attending this meeting and putting their points over, which have been noted. And I now close the meeting at 14:39. Okay, thank you.